Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Cal CCA's Community Energy Innovation Webinar Series. This is the 6th webinar since we launched the CEI series in April, and it's the third to focus on CCA resilience initiatives. The first one we had covered microgrid project at Redwood Coast Airport, and last month we looked at a residential solar plus storage program. Today the focus is backup power for commercial customers. I'm Leora Vestal, Cal CCA's Director of Communications.
And I'm Sandra McCafferty, Administrative Coordinator here at Cal CCA.
Thank you to our webinar series sponsor. Calpine is one of the largest generators of electricity in the United States and the nation's largest operator of geothermal power plants, including the 725 megawatt geysers facility in Sonoma and Lake County. Calpine Energy Solutions partners with a lot of community choice energy programs throughout California, providing key services such as data management and contact center data analytics. They now count 21 operational and soon to launch aggregators as clients, including 2 new CCAs that launch next month in Baldwin Park and Pomona. We're very excited to have 2 more CCAs on board. Today's speakers are Nelson Lomelli, Nathan Kinsey, and John Woolsey. Nelson is Program Manager at Sonoma Clean Power and is responsible for the development and implementation of customer-facing programs in the area of carbon reduction and transportation electrification. Nathan serves as Commercial Accounts Manager at Sonoma. He is responsible for managing and serving Sonoma Clean Power's largest commercial and industrial customers. And John leads the engineering department at the Center for Sustainable Energy, overseeing all engineering work, supporting programs and demonstration projects. Sandra, you want to talk about the housekeeping items?
Yes, thank you. Today's webinar is being recorded and all participants will be in listen only mode. Please use the Q&A button on your screen to type in questions at any time. A Q&A with our speakers will follow after the presentation. Please take it away, Nelson.
Great, thank you. I think if we can go on to the next slide. I want to say good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on your Friday lunch to learn more about how Sonoma Clean Power is helping commercial customers power through an outage. So we'll be talking about our Energy Resiliency Audit Program, or ERAP for short, because we love our acronyms in the industry. Leora already introduced my co-host, so we'll just go on to the next slide. So seeing as this is a Cal CCA webinar, I think many of you know who Sonoma Clean Power is and what we do, but I wanted to briefly touch base on our mission, which is to turn the tide on the climate crisis through bold ideas and practical programs. So like your CCAs, we offer 2 power options: Clean Start, which is our default service and currently 50% renewable and 90% carbon free. The graph on the side shows what our Clean Start makeup is. And then we also provide Evergreen, which is our 100% local renewable service, currently made up of 74% geothermal from the geysers in our territory and 26% solar from our 4 feed-in tariff projects throughout Sonoma and Mendocino. Next slide, please. So I will turn it over to John to introduce CSE and then over to Nathan Kinsey to set the context for ERAP.
Thank you, sir. My name is John Woolsey. I'm the Principal Engineer at Center for Sustainable Energy. For those of you that have not come across our organization before, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're fully funded by delivering service for value under contracts. That means we don't have shareholders or donors. Our core services are program administration and evaluation, advisory services, and we manage demonstration projects where new ideas are proven in the built environment. Our mission is simple: it is decarbonize. We have a vision for a future with sustainable, equitable, and resilient transportation buildings and communities. So go to the next slide. We can get on with the show.
Thanks, Sean. Hi, everyone. This is Nathan Kinsey. I'm a commercial accounts manager with SCP. So just to kind of kick off, this slide kind of gives you a good glimpse into what Sonoma Clean Power was dealing with as far as the frequency of the PSPS events in our territory last year in 2019. So, you know, they were very, in some cases, very long, in some cases, not as long, but, you know, the number of meters that were impacted was pretty dramatic. And as we moved into later October, you know, we actually had a large portion of our customers have their power shut off. And specifically the asterisk events that took place in the tail end of October into the beginning of November. You know, a lot of our customers were out of power for up to 6-7 days because there was, you know, an inability to restore power for a large portion of those. And so the 110,000 plus meters and then the 103,000 meters for those two events, there was only a small portion of customers that actually got their power back before the next event. And, you know, for last year, I think it was pretty eye-opening for everybody. And this year, we've already experienced our first event a few weeks ago in September, and we have another event coming up potentially this weekend into early next week. I think SCP is forecasted to not have any power shutdowns, but that remains to be seen. I think, you know, in addition to analyzing how these PSPS events were impacting our customers, we had to note that a lot of our customers, commercial customers, were looking at, you know, purchasing gas and diesel generators to prepare for these events in the future because they just couldn't deal with having their operations disrupted in that way. Next slide.
So as Nathan illustrated, it was pretty evident and pretty important for SCP to do something to serve our customers, to help them weather these PSPS events. So now I want to talk a little bit about the program design for ERAP. So we selected CSE from a solar and battery storage RFQ that we issued in 2019. And that RFQ was for technical analysis work related to solar and energy storage. CSE was one of the respondents, and we started to engage with them to be the technical experts on the program that would assist our commercial customers in helping them make decisions on how to power through a PSPS event, with the emphasis on not having to rely on gas or diesel generators. We really wanted to discourage the use of the generators as a way to reduce emissions and pollutants by providing a free technical and economic analysis of battery storage, and as a way to help encourage the adoption of storage by our commercial customers. So in working with CSE, we established a two-phase program to help control costs. John is going to get into a little bit of the details of the analysis, but just as an overview, the first phase is a standard desktop feasibility analysis that would look at the customer's historical usage and the customer's goal, as was gathered through a questionnaire that we will show you an example of, to determine if battery storage made any economic sense to begin with. The customer, as part of this phase, they get a report detailing the optimum capacity, the cost, any incentive amounts that are available, and the economic analysis that CSC's engineers run. So based on that, on the economic analysis, CSC would then make a recommendation to the customer as to whether they should proceed into the next phase if the battery storage made sense. So the next phase was phase 2, and that is a more in-depth look at the individual's customer site to help determine any infrastructure upgrades needed, any panel upgrades needed, anything of that sort that needed to be factored in when installing battery storage. As part of that, we would also help to determine what those costs would be to make battery storage possible. So what's not listed here is what the deliverable would be for a phase 2 analysis. And that would also be a report that lays out the results of those site visits and the infrastructure upgrades needed and the cost. Next slide, please.
And as sort of an overview of the process that Sonoma Clean Power undertook, SCP staff originally analyzed key commercial customers that were impacted from those PSPS events in 2019. And we designated specific customers as essential businesses. And those are customers that we identified as, grocery stores, shelters, food banks, and other key municipal service accounts. And then we looked at, those located in high fire threat districts as sort of the priorities that we wanted to focus on for this initial program. And my colleague, Scott Lawrence, he was really instrumental in the phase where we were actually doing the outreach to our customers. And he and I began reaching out to them directly with phone calls and emails to gauge their interest and spread the word of the program. And once we were able to engage with a customer contact, which could be a long process, and they showed that they might have some interest, we provided them with a questionnaire for them to complete. And the questionnaires looked at key facility contact information, obviously, characteristics of their business, concerns that they might have as it relates to PSPS events for the business, and various site-specific questions relevant to energy use and renewables. Once the customer completed and returned the questionnaire back to us, we would then make the handoff to the team at CSE to begin the next phase. Next slide.
So this is just an example of what that questionnaire looks like. So we just wanted to provide that for your viewing pleasure. Next slide.
All right, thanks guys. So I'll just take you quickly through first what our stage 1 analysis process looks like. So as we've already discussed, the customer questionnaire is completed, and in what we call a warm handoff, CSE receives the questionnaire along with historical billing data, site contact information, and any other notes that are generated by the Sonoma Clean Power team. And we begin our analysis. A note about billing, historical billing data. We prefer 15-minute or 1-hour interval billing data so that we can see the energy load profile on a daily basis for the properties. This is crucial when we're evaluating a battery energy storage system, because battery energy storage systems are economically evaluated based on their ability to pay for themselves within their expected service life using energy arbitrage. And understanding the daily energy use load profile is critical for energy arbitrage. You'll see here we also do apply a 4-hour duration battery energy storage system to the sizing and the analysis. Although there might be reasons to optimize for a lower duration battery, because the focus of this program is resiliency and weathering these public safety power shutoffs, we do target these larger duration batteries. Once our analysis is complete, we create a detailed technical and economic report, which goes into some detail about the performance of the proposed system, the economics on a yearly basis. They see simple payback, they see ROI, net present value. And then we add an advice letter as well, which is a 1.5 page letter that summarizes the findings from the technical and economic report That summary includes what we used for the analysis, any assumptions we had to make, and it explains the findings and any rationale behind the findings. Once all that is assembled and goes through our internal QA process, the findings, the advice letter and the technical report are communicated back to the customer and to Sonoma Clean Power. Just real quick before we move to the next slide though, the advice letter in conclusion recommends next steps. So for customers that have a favorable economic outcome, we would recommend advancement to stage 2 or phase 2 of the analysis, which is we'll look at here a little later. And if the findings of the stage 1 analysis are not economically favorable, there still may be some next steps and advice that can be offered to still address resiliency. So if we go to the next slide. Here we have just a quick example of what the advice letter would look like. As I said in the last slide, this is where we take a moment to summarize how we did the analysis, what factors were considered, our assumptions, and we explain rationale for why the conclusions are what they are. To the right here, you see some close-ups of some of the technical and economic report pages. On this page here, we see some economic plotting over a 30-year period. We see summaries based on estimated system costs, paybacks, annual bill savings. If we go to the next slide, there's a couple more examples from the phase 1 report. Here you can see a little bit more detail on what the performance of the system would be, expected lifespan, potential incentives, in this case through SGIP. We don't need to look at too much longer. I think we have, I'm going to take a moment here to mention, I do think we have a sample report that we are able to send out for anybody that's interested in seeing an example of this. So we don't worry too much about what you're able to see on this slide and the previous one. So if we go to the next slide, I want to discuss what stage 2 analysis looks like. So as was mentioned before, the stage 2 analysis is an evaluation of the customer's property to determine if the customer should anticipate additional electrical infrastructure upgrades to accommodate a battery energy storage system. So the stage 1 economic outcomes will guide the decision to recommend going to a stage 2. So when there are favorable economic outcomes, we'll move to a stage 2 process. If the customer is interested in pursuing the stage 2 evaluation, there's several avenues that we can pursue to accomplish this. We can do a property site visit. We can evaluate construction drawings and single line diagrams. And in any case, there will most likely be one or more in-depth interviews between an engineer and the property owner. And each one of these processes will result in a custom report that outlines what the electrical infrastructure upgrades may be for the customer to accommodate the installation of a battery energy storage system. And at that point, we would once this is complete, we'll hand this back to the Sonoma Clean Power team to guide their customer through next steps. So if we go to the next slide, we'll have the opportunity to talk a bit about some of the lessons we learned.
Yeah, so I want to provide context that we just launched this program in May of this year. So it's been running for a short amount of time, and we really did that with the intention to try and help out our customers to prepare for this PSPS season, if we call it that now. But even in that short amount of time, we still wanted to share some of the initial lessons learned from this program. So as you can see and you can imagine, the pandemic has had a significant impact on the program. Chief among them is the precarious financial situation that a lot of our commercial customers find themselves in. As we all know, and I'm pretty sure many of you are seeing this, many of our commercial customers are struggling just to stay in business and don't have the money to spend on a battery storage system if it's incredibly expensive. And they're having to do all kinds of decision making in terms of what upgrades and what investments need to be made, if any. The second piece that we wanted to share was that outreach in and of itself is already a time-consuming endeavor, but it's made even more so by the pandemic, since we can't meet with customers in person like we had originally planned to do, to discuss the benefits of the program and really help them get started going down this path. We also found that the questionnaire is more likely to be completed and on a faster timeline if it came from Sonoma Clean Power staff as opposed to CSE. So as we had originally designed the program, SCP staff was to do the warm handoff and introductions to CSE and then have CSE follow up with the questionnaire. And we found that that approach was taking too much time and CSE was spending too much of the budget trying to just get that questionnaire back from customers, which is when we then switched to the current approach, and we've seen a lot faster uptake and a lot faster completion of the questionnaire from customers. And if we go on to the next slide, John is going to share some more lessons learned from the technical analysis piece.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of the key takeaways that we've had so far is one is that most of the standard economic analysis that we do for battery energy storage on these properties is not resulting in positive economic outcomes. And there's a variety of reasons for that. But key, I think, especially in the nature of this program, is that quantifying the value of resiliency is always a challenge. There isn't an accepted standard for the value of resiliency in terms of hours of outage or days of outage. Every resiliency evaluation, when we're trying to quantify it in terms of dollars, is labor intensive and also very interactive with the customer type of process. So if we had more time, or if we had the ability to actually visit the site one-on-one as we're developing the questionnaires, if we were able to invest that time early on and also get the amount of time required from the customers, which would be substantial, to do the quantitative and qualitative analysis to then fully value resiliency, we would be able to confidently apply that to the battery analysis, and we suspect that that would have a favorable impact on the economic factors. But as it stands right now, the only confident way we have to evaluate the economic performance of a battery energy storage system is in its ability to perform energy arbitrage. And when you have a battery energy storage system on a property that closely follows the time of use rates and demand costs aren't excessively high, that can be a challenge. So quantifying resiliency is a huge lesson for us. And then the second one is that it's important to always take a look at solar. So some of the customers that we've done evaluations for do have solar already, and the outcomes for those customers, especially when they're a little on the larger side, they are more favorable. Maybe not as favorable as we'd all originally hoped. But for customers that do not have solar, we're seeing simple paybacks that are in excess of 30 years, which is entirely too long to consider for the installation of a battery energy storage system. So kind of earlier in the process, what we decided to start doing in conjunction with Sonoma Clean Power was to start adding a secondary technical and economic report that included an evaluation of solar. Now, the program isn't specifically designed to evaluate and provide insights on solar, but it's an easy add for us since we already have the data that we have, and we're able to show a comparison. So we can provide the customer with a report that shows the economic outcomes of a battery energy storage system only, and the economics when applying only energy arbitrage, when the only energy source is the utility, versus that second report that shows oftentimes half of the simple payback if a larger, more complex system is installed that includes solar, includes switchgear, and the battery energy storage system. So once we started doing that, we were able to start seeing more outcomes that weren't a complete turnoff for a customer that's considering battery energy storage for resiliency. And with that, I think we can jump to the next slide to let Nate pick up.
Thanks, Sean. So, what was the ultimate value we wanted to bring to our customers from this program? We wanted to provide them a benchmark of their customer readiness for PSPS events, so they know exactly where they were standing, and understanding of the various cost implications for battery storage and on-site renewables. And I think we wanted to provide them with information about the next steps to move forward with vendors and various contractors should they want to. Although no customers have moved formally forward into stage 2 of the program, some have contacted battery energy storage system vendors that we've heard from, leveraging the data and details from the report that they received from the program. And we think that slow uptake of stage 2 involvement could be a result of the feasibility for the customer in terms of time availability, their own cash flow, and obviously the potential impacts from COVID-19. And in order to better understand the reasons stage 2 uptick is sort of stalled, I think we'd have to conduct further programmatic evaluations to be able to really understand those reasons. Next slide.
Okay, guys, we're at the Q&A portion here. Thank you so much, Nelson, Nathan, and John. If anyone has any questions, just use that Q&A button to type in your questions rather than the chat, so everything is in one place. We do have a question here. Did you just assume the value of resiliency as 0 in your payback analysis? And part 2, what tools were most useful for quantifying the value of resiliency?
So in the raw economic analysis, we don't include an actual value of resiliency. We will address that in the advice letter by outlining some of the factors that the customer can apply to that. Could you repeat the second half of the question?
Of course. What tools were most useful for quantifying the value of resiliency, if you were able to use any?
Yeah, so to quantify resiliency, as we've done with other customers, that maybe the entire focus of the project was to understand the value of resiliency. We will do kind of a comprehensive evaluation. We'll look at regional risk factors, which might include seismic risks, high fire threat regions, flooding. So once we have kind of a basic understanding of what the regional risk factors are, there's a qualitative process where we will go through an interview phase with maybe the owner, if we have a larger staff that maybe has ownership of different components of it. We'll go through and evaluate what it, on a range of 0 or 1 to 5, what might be the impact of an outage between 1 hour and 5 hours. Same question for an outage between 1 day and 5 days. So we'll create a scoring rubric around what those risks, how the impacts are evaluated by the staff. And then lastly, we would look at the potential for lost product. So if it was a market that had a certain amount of inventory that couldn't be shifted or relocated or sold some other way, that was going to perish after 1 day of an outage, we would rely on the property owner, the customer, to give us the value of that potential lost product. And so those things together, it kind of starts to look more like an insurance risk analysis. So you figure out what is your actual monetary value loss in business and in product, and then you have to weigh that against the risk factors combined with the qualitative impacts reported by the customer's personnel. I think that kind of answers the question, but definitely let me know if I missed your missed your question.
Thank you. We have another question. It said, please go over the economics of this program as funded by Sonoma Clean Power.
So if I'm understanding that question, I think it's trying to get at where the funding is coming from for this program, and that is entirely being funded by Sonoma Clean Power. So there is no money needed from the commercial customer. We have a contract with CSE, and we're paying that from our program's budget that we have built into this fiscal year. That is where everything's coming from. So there's no outside funding or any kind of contribution from the customer. So yeah.
Sorry about that, had to unmute myself. I think the next question was just answered if there was a financial incentive for customers to participate. It sounds like you, that it was essentially free for the customers, correct?
Yes, it is. It's free for the customer. So we advertise it as such to our customers, say it's a complimentary or free analysis that we do for customers. In terms of financial incentives, I want to talk a little bit about whether we offer any additional incentives for the installation of the battery storage, and we don't currently. We have been evaluating what we can do in terms of financial incentives for energy storage. But what we currently do is we try to assist customers that are going through the SCHIP program. And so there's a separate program that we have that is specifically about helping customers get the SCHIP incentive. And what we did with that is we provided the SCHIP incentive amount up front, and then we would handle the application process on the back end. And so it might be different. It is different, I should say, for commercial customers, but we help them get the application in place and help them manage that process. But if you guys want to learn more about that, feel free to reach out and I can connect you to the program manager.
Thank you, Nelson. We have another question here. It said, if the program is funded entirely by Sonoma Clean Power, is Sonoma Clean Power assuming any kind of long-term financial return on this program?
No, we're not assuming any kind of long-term financial return on this program. It's we haven't looked at it in that lens yet, but that's an interesting perspective.
Oh, okay. It's Leora here again. If you guys could just say who's speaking. We've had a request that you just say, hi, this is Nathan or Nelson, just so people listening can know who's talking. Here's a question. Was the value of storage just from demand charge reduction, or did you quantify additional value from energy arbitrage? Can you speak more to that? What was the comparable values? What were the comparable values?
This is John. I can't speak right this moment exactly to that, but the biggest impact did appear to be from the value of demand, more so than energy arbitrage. But I think that was more a factor of the fact that most of the customers that we evaluated, we found that their load profiles couldn't take advantage of, just didn't take as much advantage of the variable cost in their time of use rate tariff. So it was our impression that the cost of demand was the higher or more impactful metric.
Thank you. We have another question here. This is Sandra. The question is the cost effectiveness expected to change much to TOU or time of use rates evolve as time of use rates evolve?
This is John. I might benefit from hearing that question again, assuming that the question is best answered by me.
Yes, so the question is the cost effectiveness expected to change much as time of use rates evolve?
Okay, yeah, possibly. As I said before, I do think that the cost of demand is having the bigger impact, but yeah, it may. We haven't done any type of forecast to see how changes in time of use schedules might impact this. So that's a great question that I don't have a really complete answer for at this time.
Okay, we have a question just about the report, the sample report. I will make that available when we send out the slides and recording of the webinar. So that will be available to everyone. Another question, are there particular types of customers, manufacturing, office, et cetera, that you would recommend as the best potential targets for solar plus storage outreach?
This is Nathan with Sonoma Clean Power. I mean, I think it would really be determined based on what the ultimate goal is. So if you're looking at trying to, offer something directly to a customer beyond what we're doing as far as it related to the PSPS events, it's difficult to say what customer type is ideal. I think for this program, and as it relates to PSPS, we had key criteria that we're looking for as far as customer types and what their business operations were, and where they were located within our territory. And
Thank you.
Additionally, there's other things to consider as far as, can a customer, do they have the site space availability to install on-site renewables and batteries? Is it feasible financially for them to do so? From my experience thus far, different customers have different priorities regardless of if they have the space and finances to be able to do something like that. Some have interest to do it, some don't. So it really depends from one customer to the next.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. It said, what does a program like this can cost?
Well, it's Nelson with Sonoma Clean Power. I saw that question come in a couple of times. So we have a time and materials type of contract with the Center for Sustainable Energy, and we have a not to exceed amount of $90,000. And so that is what we dedicated for this initial phase of the program, or I should say this initial part of the program. We'll reevaluate and see if we need to increase that amount or what changes need to be done in the future as we start going into this PSPS season and seeing what those impacts are for our commercial customers.
Yeah, and this is Nathan, Sonoma Clean Power. I'd also say in relation to that, in terms of cost, we internally had sort of a benchmark to accommodate this type of offer to roughly 25 commercial accounts in relation to the budget for like a pilot. So if we had planned on, more customers, obviously I think there'd be a change in the budget that would be needed to accommodate that, in addition to, how far along customers go from stage 1 into stage 2.
That's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up, Nate. What I'll add is that, as Nate said, I think we have now enrolled over 25 customers into the program to complete a stage 1 analysis. And there is still room in the budget for more. What I think our understanding has always been that if we have a mad rush of customers trying to get this analysis where the budget can't support it, we would then go back to our board and request an additional amount for this program.
This is John. I would also add that when we were developing this and working with Sonoma Clean Power to figure out how to evenly spread out the budget and make sure that there were as many customers being touched as possible, we set kind of a time budget for each of our phase 1 customer interactions. And then internally at CSE, we looked at that goal and thought, well, we can bring that down quite a bit so that we had some margin when we did end up with a more complex case, or if we had somebody that required a lot of back and forth on the technical side. But I think the key, at least from the consultant side, was that once we got into our rhythm and we established repeatable processes, we got a lot more efficient with the phase 1 evaluations, leaving a little bit more room to fit in more folks. And I think that anywhere a program like this gets replicated, there will be that initial, we'll call it like kind of a slow start as everybody gets their bearings and figures out what's going to work for this region and population. And then once you get into the flow, you just start shifting into higher and higher gears. And it does allow the budget to stretch a little bit more as time goes on.
Thank you. What assumptions in your payback did you use for subsidies for storage, given the fact that it is changing, it is on a first come, first serve basis for SCHIP?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we did talk about, by the way, this is John. We did talk about what components of SGIP to include, because for some customers, there may be opportunities to take advantage of resiliency and equity budgets. But we decided to shy away from that. So we were just going with the standard energy storage incentives for SGIP. Understanding it as first come, first serve, these evaluations and the analysis that we provide, these aren't any types of guarantees. These should be seen more as feasibility. And so it gives the customer some guidance as to like what's feasible, what's not, what's realistic. And when we were trying to decide what we should include, like which budgets from SGIP we should show them or not, we felt that it was best to give them the conservative case rather than an overly aggressive case. That's my instinct as a consultant working with utilities. In my experience, it's best to help manage expectations, especially when you might be steering customers to a program that you don't actually have any control over.
Okay.
Thank you. We have another question here. Can a customer still move forward if it's not economic per se, but they want the resiliency?
I think I'll take that one.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, Nathan, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think so. I think it's just a matter of what it is that they want to get out of it. I mean, that's a very interesting consideration. I haven't really thought about, that scenario before, but I think that they would be able to. Nelson, if you have something else.
I was only going to add and say that there's nothing in our program design or anything of that sort that prohibits a customer from moving forward. So if they did want to move ahead, even if the economic analysis didn't indicate a favorable piece, then yeah, we wouldn't stop them. And
Okay. Oh, sorry, did I interrupt? Were you going to add something?
I was just going to add that even though some of the economic analysis have not shown them to be favorable, like we said earlier in the presentation, some customers have decided to move into contacting vendors directly, even without the phase 2 analysis.
Okay, another one about the types of customers that participated. Is there a trend in the types that engaged with the program? For example, were they manufacturing or retail or other types of companies?
Yeah, this is Nathan with Sonoma Clean Power. I would say that no, we didn't experience any specific trend. I think we had a target originally that we wanted to attempt to make contact with because we identified their business as a key essential service. However, this really, those that we engaged with and moved forward with stage 1 was all over the place. It was from grocery stores to fire departments to hospitality to animal hospital care to wineries. I mean, it was really all over the board. And originally, we thought that there would be a niche that we could engage with, but it turns out that so many different types of customers have a need for this. I think a lot of it came down to whether or not customers in the circumstances everyone's dealing with the pandemic, who has the time to engage with this, whose business is still up in operations, and what they can do as far as priorities. So although we had an initial customer segment that we wanted to engage with, it quickly evolved to accommodate many others.
Okay, thank you. Based on the results to date, does it seem that a pool of incentives are needed to move customers best suited for solar plus storage from thinking about storage to actually installing it? Is the state doing enough to support these installations, I think is the question.
I think I'll take that one. This is Nelson with Sonoma Clean Power. So I would say that, yes, I think there needs to be incentives for customers for battery storage. Clearly, there was a rush on SCHIP funding, and people want the incentives. So definitely think there is still a need for those. The question again is, how much to get them to move them from thinking about it to actually doing it. And then I think another piece also is making the program less complicated to get the funding. As we've all seen, SCHIP is a pretty complicated program, and the incentive amounts are widely different, and there's all sorts of rules. So I think simplifying that could also help get people to move from thinking to installing. So we'll keep an eye on that and see how much is needed and what we can potentially do.
Thank you, Nelson. Just a couple more, and I think we'll be close to the end time. Does Sonoma Clean Power have any plans to eventually link and bundle the commercial battery energy storage systems into any sort of microgrid or virtual power plant system?
This is Nelson again. Thank you, Stephen, for that question. I think that's the popular question. So we definitely do have like grand plans, grand thinking in terms of bundling all sorts of battery storage and doing some sort of virtual power plant. And we're experimenting with that through our Grid Savvy program. But as it relates to this program, we don't have any specific plans where if you participate in this program or anything of that sort, that you would need to allow us to do that. So the short answer is yes, but not as part of this program.
Okay, great. And I think this will be the last one. What assumptions did you use for battery costs installation, given the range of pricing in the industry?
This is John. That's a good question. For the battery energy storage economics, we rely on a tool called Energy Toolbase, which uses I believe an aggregate of market data. So we weren't setting the pricing ourselves manually. It was based on an analytic tool that we've been deploying for this program. And again, the tool is called Energy Toolbase.
Okay, thank you again, everyone, for those great questions. Just a few additional resources to find out more about the resilience projects and programs that CCAs are working on, like the one you just learned about from Sonoma. We have actually a handout that was recently updated and lists all of the projects the CCAs are working on. It's posted on our website at the address right there at the bottom of the slide. And you can find it on our website, posted under info resources, where the orange circle is. We have lots of great fact sheets posted to our website. Really we have news related to resilience and clean energy running every day almost. We have new announcements under the member news section. Our quarterly report, just a plug for that in the upper right-hand corner there, is also a great place to see all of the projects and programs that the CCAs are working on in one place. It's a PDF that you can download.
A recording of this webinar will be posted on our Cal CCA website at cal-cca.org on the webinars page, where you can find information about upcoming webinars, which take place on the last Friday of each month.
Thanks, Sandra. Next month's topic focuses on ways energy providers can identify cost-effective, scalable, and replicable programs for deploying DERs. The webinar will feature speakers from MCE and Terra Verde. We appreciate you spending your time with us today. If you would like additional information or have follow-up questions, you can reach me at leora@cal-cca.org. Stay well, everyone.